Okay. Hi again. Well, we're all here today to speak with Emma Reeves, and she has so many credits. I better start now. Uh, Aside from being she's the TV chair of the Writers Guild. She's also an award-winning writer, having worked across telly and stage, screen and stage, both for children's and peak time. Uh, Emma's written for a lot of very popular series, including Tracy Beaker in all her many incarnations, The Demon Headmaster, 3 series of Eve, which she co-created herself, and Hetty Feather on telly and stage. And Emma's actually won an Olivier Award for her stage version of The Worst Witch. And if she wasn't a friend, I couldn't bear it. We're here to talk about Emma's writing and children's writing. Also, we're going to be a celebration. It's the 30th anniversary of the first Tracy Beaker book, and it's almost 20 years of the BBC television series. So, Emma, let's start easily. How did you get into all this? How did you become a writer?
Well, I started off, I was an actor for a while, and then I started writing as a result of that.
Oops, Emma, you're muted.
Sorry, it said the host muted me. I don't know how I'm not sure how that happened.
That's enough from Emma, thanks. Okay.
Yes. So, yeah, I started off as an actor. I then moved into writing. I wrote some stage adaptations, and I did an MA in script writing. And I also, sort of how Tracy Beaker was my first TV commission, and the story of Tracy Beaker, episodes of that. And I was part of a development group at BBC Wales at the time, and the story of Tracy Beaker, they filmed in Cardiff. They had they used to make long series, 22 episodes of 15 minutes. So it was a good place for people to get their first credit. So they used to try out a lot of new writers. So I got my first job on that, and it was through a development group at BBC Wales. Because I'd sent work to BBC Wales, and it was one of those sort of very lucky chances that at the time they were putting together a group of potential sort of promising writers, and I was part of that. And through that, I was suggested to the story of Tracy Beaker and joined them on series 4.
Well, I mean, you've certainly done a lot of BBC shows. I was going to say, just out of interest, when you were a child, what was your favourite show?
I think it was probably Doctor Who, and it probably still is. So maybe just sort of not moving on has been a key theme of my life. But yes, but I was also a very keen viewer of children's TV shows. So I was keen on things like sort of Renter, Ghost and Grange Hill. All the classics. Famous Five, of course. So yours.
Oh, thank you. You're just saying that. No, but thanks. I mean, did watching the shows inspire you to write, or did you always know you were going to write?
I didn't know I was going to write. I did used to write things. When I was a kid, I used to write poetry and all sorts of things. But I think I think it certainly fired my imagination. Put it that way.
Well, since you started with Tracy Beaker, what's it like to adapt an iconic book?
Well, I mean, I've worked on a lot of adaptations, and quite a lot of them have been iconic books. Some of them been less well known. It's exciting and terrifying. I mean, you know that you can't please everyone, and there's a range of responses, positive and negative. I mean, the one that you really want is, I love the original and I love your adaptation. Obviously you don't ever get a full house of those. Sometimes people sort of say, I didn't much like the original book, but I liked your show, which is quite, I mean, obviously I'm very pleased they liked what I've done, but I usually want them to love the original book as much as I do. So I think, and obviously there are people like, I love the original, hate what you did with it, which obviously you get quite a bit. And then there's just the I hate the original and I hate your adaptation. It's just like, well, what can you do? But I mean, I think it's difficult because, like, as a fan of things, I know that there are some sort of books and things which I love so much, and I haven't watched the adaptations of them because you know, and I mean, I always sort of say, if, you know, people quite flippantly, but, you know, if I'm not taking away the original of anything, that is still there on the shelf. If you don't like what I've done, you can choose not to watch it. And there are things I've chosen not to watch, even though I probably would love the adaptation, but because they're so special to me that I don't particularly want to mess with the version in my head. And so I'm a massive hypocrite, because usually when I'm offered the chance to adapt something I love, I'm like, yes, please. So.
I mean, it's always, when working with the original author can be, it can go either way. I mean, which I found in my own experience. But how about you?
I mean, I've always had very positive experiences with the original authors that I've worked with. It's, you know, it's difficult because it is a sort of strangely intimate relationship, and it, you know, and I think sometimes you're sort of you're urging writers to you know, you're not, you know, sometimes people can be a bit, you know, you're not saying they've got it wrong, but sometimes you're sort of like trying to dig down into, well, how does this work, you know, and asking questions about the work which they may not want to answer. But you know, but I sort of feel that, you know, sometimes I feel like, well, I need an answer, or if there isn't an answer, I'm gonna have to make up an answer. You know, as examples, say The Worst Witch, we only really what you don't really get much of a sense in the Worst Witch books about how the world of the witching school sort of fits into the real world, and what is its relationship with our world, and where does it stand. And I sort of felt that was something that we wanted to sort of, you know, with a light touch, but you know, we wanted to know what we were doing. So so we'd have long conversations with Jill Murphy about that. But yeah, you know, I think, you know, I know that some adapters don't always and I think there are sometimes reasons why you sort of might not have such a sort of cozy relationship with the writer or their vision. But I think usually I've tried to be kind of faithful to the writer and their vision and what they want, and sort of work with them.
Yeah, I mean, I found, especially with one writer whose book I was adapting, that one had to very patiently always say, it's a different medium, and you have to show different things on a teleseries than you might in a book, and some things have to be expanded, and also you can't see people's thoughts like you can in a book. But without being flippant, there was a time I preferred dead authors, but unless you're dealing with their estates. And
yes, well, I mean, estates can be trickier than authors themselves, can't they?
Yes, very, very much so. And which is why a tip: look for out of copyright when you can.
Yes.
Which is why there are a few books that suddenly became out of copyright, which is why there's an abundance of adaptations of them now. But you work with Jacqueline Wilson, who's a great author. How do you find that?
Well, she is, and she is very easy, very accommodating, and she absolutely gets that, you know, things need to change for different media. You know, as you know, as you mentioned, I worked on both the stage and TV versions of Hetty Feather of Jacqueline's, which were very different. And you know, Jacqueline is sort of usually very, you know, very open to you know, to the idea that certain things need to change. And I mean, it's funny with Jacqueline, I think she writes at quite a pace, and that there are some, you know, there are some times where sometimes she can't remember what's something that she put in and something that I made up, and sometimes I can't remember. So you know, I think it's sort of, I guess we're quite in tune in that way.
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question from well, it's from an iPad, about how gritty can you go with writing for 7 to 11-year-olds, as long as there's hope at the end of the story. I'd ask, does it have to be hope? But I'm harsher.
I think there are quite a few sort of questions there, because there's sort of what's acceptable to the 7 to 11-year-olds, there's what's acceptable to their parents, and what's acceptable to the networks, what's acceptable to the people who are getting it out there. So, you know, if you're writing a novel, it might be sort of what's acceptable to publishers. Novels can usually, and it's not because of the nature of the young people themselves, it's more because of the gatekeepers. So I think with I mean, I would say, yeah, you can be very as gritty as gritty as real life is from the point of view of the young readers or viewers themselves. I think quite often the more pertinent question is sort of getting past the gatekeepers and getting to them, and you know, the parents who you know, the TV channels are afraid the parents will write letters, you know, publishers are afraid the parents won't give the kids money to buy the books, you know. I think, and the hope question, I mean, I generally I mean, it's interesting because not, as you say, not all writing for young people does have hope. I remember there was a big vogue for Robert Cormier's books when I was young, which are just pretty much unremittingly bleak. But I would say that possibly what sort of distinguishes writing for young people is that there should usually be hope there, or a hope for positive change. It's sort of like, and that will help you get past the gatekeepers as well, to be brutal. But it's sort of like, why are you telling this dark, gritty story? You know, are you trying to inspire people to, you know, and so the hope could be, even if you're telling a very grim story of somebody who comes to a horrible end, it could be that you're trying to inspire young people to change the world and make it better, so that these things don't happen anymore. So I think there can be hope in that way. Yeah.
No, as you say, gatekeepers are all important, and we disrespect them at our peril because they control it. But well, I mean, you've had a luxury of, you've been able to develop a character over 20 years. What's that? Because not a lot of people get to do that, unless you're Ken Barlow or writing for Ken Barlow. But I mean, what's it like for children's television to do that?
I mean, it's been interesting because, of course, it's been various different shows. So the story of Tracy Beaker was this sort of 15-minute episodes, and kind of sort of possibly aimed at the younger to mid end of the CBBC audience. That ran for 5 years. Then a few years later, we had Tracy Beaker Returns, which was a slightly older skewing show, I would say. Tracy was the lead character, and she was aged 18 to 20 during the course of the show. And the attention sort of moved on to the young people that she was looking after. So, I mean, I've sort of never been in sort of sole charge of Tracy, as it were, until this final My Mum Tracy Beaker, which is this 3-parter which recently came out, which is based on the Jacqueline Wilson novel. So it's and it's been, you know, it's been amazing to sort of see the engagement with the character over the years, and sort of, you know, something like, you know, when we were still allowed to go out, I would go out and, you know, meet young people in their 20s who would be like, oh my God, Tracy Beaker, my childhood. So it's been yeah, it's been an incredible journey, but obviously it's not just me that's in charge of the journey. It's been all sorts of producers, and of course it's Jacqueline's character.
Of course. But well, you've done your own creations as well, like Eve. How difficult is it to get your own children's series on?
I mean, I will be honest and say it's very difficult to get original stuff away. I mean, you know, even, or certainly, you know, I found it so. I mean, even, you know, even with the amount of work I've done, the amount of episodes of different shows I've written, you know, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to get the chance to write Eve. It's not easy, and I think, you know, and that this is often the case with TV in general, but I've certainly found it with shows for young people that you know, there's obviously an awful lot of shows that I've written have been based on a very well-known IP. There's a reason for that. I think people, commissioners feel more comfortable with that. So it's, I would say, yeah, my experience is it is sadly very difficult to get your own original show way, although obviously you can talk a lot about that because you made your original show and sold it to CBBS. So.
Yes, it's yeah, there are different ways, because that's what I want to discuss, because children's television is a very changed landscape, you know, over the past 10 years in a great way, because there are so many different platforms. I mean, as you were just saying, Emma, I had some partners and we wanted to do a series, and we ended up making it independently, which wasn't easy. It took us 4 years, but at least we're all still speaking. And we ended up with the BBC acquiring the series, which we never in a million years expected. But it was great to go our own route, you know, because it's very much better or for worse what we wanted to make, hopefully for better. And so new platforms give a great freedom as well, but it's not the easiest. But I mean, how do you find children's television's changed, or has it, since you started?
I think things have, you know, I think there have been sort of, you know, to be really brutally sort of honest and between ourselves and sort of between friends, because this is a guild event, I think there have been some, in the past, some very unfortunate negative changes, and you know, I can only hope, looking to the future, that things will begin to improve again. I think there are various cul-de-sacs that things went down. I think obviously ITV, you know, when I first started, I mean, I've never worked for ITV, but when I first started, they were a big employer of children's writers. A lot of my colleagues and contemporaries did a lot for CITV. That, I think it was a ruling about advertising on children's TV, which pretty much overnight pulled CITV, and so almost halved the opportunities for children's writers in Britain. So that was one disaster.
Well, it was, yeah, I was going to say it was also a bit of political skullduggery, because part of the ITV franchise is that they have to supply children's programs, but certain prime ministers let them off the hook.
Yeah. Also, Channel 4 is under its charter is supposed to provide more children's programming, which than they do, which is almost none. And the BBC would kind of love to get out of it. It often seems they obviously, and moving CBBC off BBC One onto its own channel entirely had an effect on the artistic side, which was, it made it much tougher to get anything through which was in any way challenging or gritty, because
Really?
yeah, this is what I was told, because we were always told that anything that was, so, you know, for instance, they sort of before they cancelled Grange Hill, they sort of re-envisaged its age, so that it sort of concentrated more on the younger kids, and sort of completely changed the nature of what it used to be. And it was, and I was constantly told, you know, because working on shows such as Young Dracula and even The Dumping Ground, which occasionally pushed the boundaries, and certainly and Eve, because the sort of the main sort of age range of the channel is meant to be 6 to 12, which is an impossible sort of age group, really. Anything that would be challenging for a sensitive 6-year-old wouldn't fly. So basically, it sort of felt that things had to be very much aged down, and so, you know, the more sort of some of the stronger content that you got sort of on Children's Wood, Byker Grove, Grange Hill in the 80s, you couldn't depict these sorts of things, like you know, for instance, we weren't really allowed to sort of say that drugs exist when I was working on The Dumping Ground, so, which is obviously, you know, a huge change from sort of 30 years earlier on Grange Hill. So
really? It's actually verboten, that you can't.
Absolutely, yeah, it was. I mean, the thing is also, the rules changed constantly. The rules change all the time. So you know, so one series would be writing, you know, sort of, you know, warnings about sort of, you know, look out for internet predators. In the next series, we can't mention the internet. There was a series where we couldn't mention the internet. So, I mean, as I said, things come in and out of fashion.
Well, on one hand, it's fashion, and the other hand, fair play, it's executives.
Absolutely executives, yes. And it's sort of, and what sort of risks they're willing to take. And I think sort of famously, in the original Tracy Beaker series, I mean, if you look at the books, Cam is very clearly gay, and Jacqueline has lived with a woman for many years. And on the original Tracy Beaker show, when I read the books and I said, so Cam's gay, right? And they said, oh, yes, but we don't mention that. By series 5, they've married Cam off to a man. And it took Ellie Brewer, who was the lead writer on Tracy Beaker Returns, it took her 3 years to get the powers that be to agree for one of the kids to be fostered by a lesbian couple. And now, obviously, in the recent My Mum Tracy Beaker, we have Cam finally marrying a woman. So I think sort of because of sort of CBBC being very much, or you know, or sort of for quite a while being the sort of the only real sort of maker of kind of naturalistic homegrown content about British kids from the ages of sort of 7 to 11. It sort of felt, because there wasn't any competition, they were a bit meek about what they could show, and you know, anything that might get a letter, it'd be, oh, better not do that then. But I think sort of obviously the streamers and knowing what you know, kids are watching all sorts of things elsewhere, I think, and also children's shows moving towards being iPlayer first, I think that might change things. And certainly, you know, I mean, you know, sort of it seems ludicrous looking back that like in the mid 2000s we weren't allowed to depict gay characters on CBBC, but we were very, very strongly discouraged from it, I have to say.
Goodness. I mean, I was going to say one of the great things is about children's television now is the diversity and the equality, because there are so many different voices. I mean, and I'm speaking as somebody who, one of my first things was I adapted Enid Blyton.
Yes.
You know, there was not a lot of well, maybe there was diversity in the famous 5. That's another discussion. But it's so good to see diverse writers and diverse characters and voices coming in, because it's important. I mean, don't you think it's important to reflect? It's important to reflect children back to them and their worlds and what they see around them. I mean,
yes, it's very true. And I think, you know, I think certainly in terms of diverse writers, we can always do better. And I think you know, I know CBBC knows it needs to do better and is trying. I think, you know, I've just been a bit negative about CBBC, so I will say that one thing that they were good about back in the noughties, and even now, they are conscious of on-screen diversity, particularly in casting disabled actors to play roles which are not necessarily all about being disabled. And I think sort of, you know, I mean, Hollywood's barely there now, so I think children's has often been kind of ahead of the curve with certain sorts of diversity. Yeah,
and you know, and also we want more diversity off screen as well, obviously, for writers and things, you know, because it's important. Do you ever think that as a children's telly writer, we're messing with children's minds a lot?
Yes.
Because what children see at a very early age, and the television they watch stays with them forever. I mean, you must have it as well, that, you know, you have people now who are no longer children, you know, coming to talk to you about things you wrote 20 years ago.
Yes, I mean, you know, and it's a sort of, you know, potentially scary privilege, but yeah, I mean, I sort of certainly remember things very strongly that I watched as a child. And I think but I think I've said this to you before, that a few years back the BBC did a big survey of the nation's favorite books, and they had like a list of about 100 books, and nearly all of them were either books aimed at young people or books that you might read quite young, as you know, you might read them through school or whatever, like, you know, say To Kill a Mockingbird or Jane Eyre. So I sort of think, you know, what enters your life early stays with you very strongly.
Oh, I mean, definitely. And also something that you just said, I mean, we've had spirited and friendly disagreements about, I think BBC is very committed to children's television. Uh, you
I
know,
really hope so. Good. I hope so.
so do I, obviously, we all do. But I think, I like to think BBC take their role very seriously. And also, on another level, children's television and children's series and programming is a major player worldwide.
Yes.
I mean, there are over 2,000 children's platforms globally. So, you're not, you're hoping for, to get on as many of those as possible with the series.
Yes.
Because also, if I can say, in the old days, you might sell to, a series might sell to one overseas platform, but now you can sell to, unless you're doing an exclusive deal with Netflix or whatever, your series can be sold to any and all, because they want to get on as many platforms as possible.
Yeah, and even if you are on, with Netflix, like The Worst Witches on Netflix, but they've sold it to, all sorts of, territories around the world. And so, yeah, it is exciting to know that the show could be out there being watched by people in loads of countries. So yes, as I was saying, I think I just sort of felt that possibly things went down a bit of a cul-de-sac in the 90s and noughties, but I think sort of now I like to sort of hope that things are very much opening up. I think there was a time, because children's BBC and CBBC and CBeebies were channels, there was, I felt, a pressure for a sort of house style and for everything to sort of, that the CBBC audience was a homogenous thing, which of course it could never be. Whereas I think the sort of the ethos of the sort of streamers is, the show finds its audience, and it doesn't, every show might have a slightly different audience, and that's fine. And I think that's, it's opening up hopefully loads of creative possibilities. And so putting iPlayer first, as the BBC plans to do, is actually a kind of a good thing, because it doesn't mean that, this show needs to be 9 p.m. on a Friday, this show needs to be 4 p.m. It's sort of that shows can find an audience in the way that books do.
Oh, very much so. And also, especially for children, very often they'll stream the whole lot. If it's on iPlayer or whatever, they'll binge like all the rest of us. But it's no. Was Worst Witch a co-production? Was that Netflix originally?
No, that was in-house children's BBC, but Netflix put some money in, and I think it was a co-production, but I think the opinion of or sort of from what I gleaned from CBBC was that if Netflix sort of hadn't sort of put enough money in to be like the lead creative, so
Yes.
So it was very much sort of the producers really were in-house children's BBC.
Yes, I've played that game as well with co-pros. It's always how much money did they put in?
Yes.
Oh, that,
I think,
so
for instance, they wanted to change it so that the lead character was American, and I think CBBC's view was you haven't put enough money in for that major change. So
is the door still open for The Worst Witch? Would any more be done?
At the moment, because I only worked on series 1 of The Worst Witch. I think The Worst Witch, I believe, has finished for now. But I mean, that is obviously this was the second major British TV version of The Worst Witch. The first one having been ITV in the 90s. So
Okay.
So who knows? Then I'm sure there might be more future for The Worst Witch.
Yeah, I was also going to throw out just something for everyone to remember when you write a children's series. The lovely thing is now, aside from all the platforms your series can be sold on, is you can help people find, you can help the audience find your series, because that's what social media is for. Yes. And if you, sort of use social media wisely, and your production company or the broadcaster doesn't mind that you're not saying things that they wouldn't be happy with, it's great, because you can be proactive and sort of spread the love around on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, get all your friends. It's a time that writers and children's writers get to be more proactive.
Yeah,
and that is so important. But I mean, Emma, you've had I mean, the brilliant opportunities that you write stage as well as television. So how do you find the difference when doing children's? What's the difference between stage writing and screenwriting for you?
Well, I mean, I think I suppose one big difference, and obviously with stages, you're telling 1 2 hour story, and you get to sort of rework that and hone that. I think because with The Worst Witch and Hetty actually, I was working. I think with both. No, I think The Worst Witch I sort of did the TV then the stage. Hetty I was almost working on both simultaneously, though I wasn't the lead writer on the TV. I think I was very keen to take advantage of the feeling that on stage it's happening now. You're amongst it. So and I think also as a writer you can sort of engage much more directly with the with the actors and with all the creatives on stage. But I think what on the sort of budgets that most sort of TV series have, what you can't really do so much on TV is sort of, let's workshop this with the actors, let's try, if there's a lot of stages of development and people in a room earnestly discussing whether this scene works, and you can't just go, let's get the actors to do it and then we'll know, because you can't like prove your point by acting it out. So theatre is much more directly sort of creative in that way. And also I think one thing that's interesting is on the obviously when you're with Hetty and with The Worst Witch, in both cases we're working with adult actors entirely on the stage shows, so you sort of engage them in a slightly different way, whereas when you're working with child actors, it's sort of more of a case of like, right, we'll lay it all out for you and then sort of slot the child in according to the schedule, whereas with when you're working with adult actors, it's sort of you're a bit more able to sort of go, right, we're creating this together.
Oh, lovely. Because we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, about how someone gets into children's writing now. But can I also just point out before I forget, when we were discussing domestic markets, C5, Channel 5 does have Milkshake for a few hours, and every morning. They're for youngers. It's younger children. It's more preschool, and it's more CBBS territory, but they are buying series, and they actually, so it's nice to see another new market, terrestrially, as it were. But I mean, how does one get into children's television now, or children's writing?
Well, I mean, the same as any writing, you sort of need to sort of have some sort of luck and be in the right place at the right time. But I think if by being persistent, you can be in lots of places. So I hope that one will be the right time. I think I suppose like anything, I'm not going to sort of pretend it's easier than it is. It's but I know that a lot of CBBC shows and CBB shows, particularly sort of long-running ones, are always on the lookout for good new writers. So so I would suggest. I mean, obviously you can write an original script and send it to CBBC or CBBS, and I think they do have people who will read things. I think that they're so and they are often looking for new shows to develop. Also, but also they're looking to help help shows find new writers. So I think if you spot a show that you think you could write well for, and send them your sort of sample script, which doesn't have to be necessarily aimed at children, because everyone that makes these shows is an adult. They can see the potential for they can see the potential in a script, even if it's not suitable for their audience. I think The Dumping Ground is an example of an ongoing show which is often looking for new writers. I mean, CBBC is the world that I know best, but I think you might know a bit more about CBBS or Milkshake.
Yeah, I would say it's the same. And also don't forget, because very often all these series are made by independent production companies for the BBC. So have a look and see which production companies they are and write to them directly.
Yes, I think that's a really important point generally about writing, just, yeah, because everything is, even BBC Studios is now a sort of super indie. So yeah, look, look to see who makes the shows you like, and write to those production companies.
Yeah, and write to the people. I mean, there is BBC Writers' Room, but these days I always say the answer is D, all of the above. You don't have to send, I mean, your sample script or scenes or whatever to just one person or one company. You can send them to as many as you want, and see what you get back. And the nice thing is, very often, you might send, an original idea or whatever, and they might not be in the market for that, but they'll go, well, you might be interesting on something we're doing right now, and they could give you a tryout, so you get in that way. But I mean, in my experience, nothing is ever wasted. That if you cast your bread upon the waters, you'll get something back, hopefully, other than soggy bread. You'll make a lot of contacts, and information is key, knowledge and information.
I mean, that was very much my sort of approach when I was starting out, that I was sort of pushing on several kind of fronts at once. I was doing theatre, I was sending work to production companies, and I also worked as a script reader for companies, and that ended up getting me some work as well, because you get known to a company. So I think it's worth just, and of course, even when you're very sort of experienced and established, everyone will tell you that you will still hit a lot of dead ends. So I think it's crucial to be doing all of the above, because you don't sort of ever, set your mind too much on, this is very unartistic sounding pragmatic advice, but if you want to have a career as a writer, you kind of have to not, at the same time, you have to be really passionate about everything you do and put all your heart and soul into it. But on the other hand, you have to sort of hold something back for when it gets rejected. So
yeah, well, you've got to duck and dive a lot.
Yeah.
And see, also a very good tip is who's got the money, which production companies have the money at which time. And very often, if new executives come into a company, that's the best time to get in touch with them, because very often new brooms are sweeping clean and want a slate of their own. It's the same thing if you're looking for an agent. See who the young agent's assistants are, because they might be more likely to take you on than the name agent from the agency who is handling a lot of the star names or whatever. But it's and also, I mean, you've done the same. Is you don't let anyone pigeonhole you. You don't have to own. You're not just a children's writer, which is an honorable profession, but you can write adult and children and whatever you want.
Yes.
So it's.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep doing different sorts of work, and I think I think one thing that people need to be aware of, because I think sort of sometimes sort of particularly film festivals or whatever can sort of enthusiastically say children's writing, a great way to get into television, and I sort of think, well, it's a great way to get into children's television. It won't necessarily lead you anywhere else. So if you want to get into children's television writing, you'd better enjoy writing that sort of show, because it won't necessarily lead you anywhere else. So it depends whether that's somewhere you want to be for itself.
Yes, and I mean, as you were just saying, whatever you're writing, hopefully you should love it, because it'll show on the screen if you don't, and also it'll show in your grey hairs if you don't. Well, here's a question, because I know the Guild has resources on this, but can you make a living writing children's television? Although I prefer, can you make a living watching children's television? Would be preferable, but
Yes, yes, you can, and and I know a lot of people who do, including you, Gail. So we did an event on this, and we had I think Kate put together a distilled 10-point plan, which everyone should have had. So yes, you can.
Yes, it's and I can't stress perseverance enough. But someone was asking about how do you feel about writing a novel or similar? Are you able to shift your thought processes aim for something, you know. I mean, have you written a novel or?
No, I mean, and I know a lot of people who do, and a lot of you know, I think because of as I was saying before, the TV preoccupation with other sorts of IP has led a lot of screenwriters to start writing novels.
Oh yes.
I mean, you know, and I think sort of, you know, well, obviously George R.R. Martin was a screenwriter before he wrote Game of Thrones, and I think one sort of supposed, you know, probably apocryphal story around that was that he was so sick of TV writing, he wanted to write something that could never be done on TV because the budget would be so massive, and then so he created, you know, mile-high ice walls and things, and then it ended up being made for TV. But it's not something that I personally have done. It's sort of something which, you know, people have even approached me about doing, but it's always been sort of, you know, the deadline's been too short, and I'm saying, look, this would be an entire new set of skills for me to learn. But I think, but for those who do have those skills or can learn those skills, I think it's probably a very good idea, because I think there is often, you know, that as a pure script writer, the sort of frustration you often come up against with when you sort of meet with production companies is we want something to work on with you, but sort of, you know, any novel, even a poorly selling, poorly written novel, is better than just something made up out of the head of a TV writer. It can sometimes feel like that. So those of you who have the skills or want to learn the skills to write novels, I would say go for it.
You're right. It's very chicken and egg, because a lot of times production companies and broadcasters feel that it's less of a risk if it's based on a book, when we know, in fact, life doesn't work that simply. But yeah, so sometimes people are going, I shall write the book first, and then you can say, well, it is based on a book. But it is a catch-22, because when you're doing a television series and want to put out a book on it, they go, well, we want to see first how the series, you know, so each one thinks the other is a risk. Now there's another question, if you don't mind. This one is for me, but please feel free to join in, Em. Some very nice words about my series, Monty Co. And as was pointed out, it was made with the old Pipkins, if you remember Hartley Hare. When I first started, that was one of the first things I did. And we all got together again to make Monty Co., which is ours. And can you please tell me, did writing as a producer affect any of your writing decisions? I can really recommend, and you've been associate producer and produced some of your stuff, Emma. I mean, from my point of view, it's fantastic, because if you're experienced as a writer, you know what you can and can't do. You know, if you expect the BBC to show it, then you know what, although they've been wonderful with us, but it's occasionally, if I'm taking too long with a script, I have to have a word with myself as producer, but as writer, I don't listen. So it's, you know, you get that. But I mean, the more knowledge you can have, and the one thing, again, Emma, I don't know how much access you've had to sets and all the rest. I was lucky that when I started, you were, and I did a lot at ITV, the different companies, you were encouraged to take part, to go on the set, to read throughs, you know, one or two rehearsals. Obviously, you're not going to sit there the whole time, and also editing and dubbing. So the more you learn, it's great, because those are skills you just absorb for producing, and it makes your work better, because you also know the tricks of how to make it look better for less money.
Yeah.
And easier. But what about you?
Well, I've been associate producer on quite a few things that I've written. I think sort of in general, the amount of access for writers, you know, will depend on the production team. But again, I think writers should, you know, I'm a supporter of the writer's showrunner model. I know that there are issues with it, which is why the Guild has done all this work on guidelines for, you know, for writers showrunners, for working and for those working with them, for non-writing execs working with them, and for episode writers working with them. I'm certainly, you know, I don't know if there's a single existing non-flawed model, but the Guild is trying to, you know, encourage best practice. I mean, I've just found, you know, I think some people think that that all the admin and day-to-day decisions of producing takes the writer away from writing. But I think if but it's a collaborative industry, and the alternative is if you don't get involved with the production sides, decisions will be made that you don't like. So at least if by getting involved as a producer, at least you can be part of those decisions. And I think, for example, Eve, which I was very hands-on with, I remember battling, and it's for another writer's script, but there was just a sequence which I knew would be brilliant, but they were saying they couldn't afford it. And I just remember sort of, I was there with the producer, just sort of drawing pictures and sort of going, okay, if we rewrite it so that, you're saying there's 5 CGI shots, but I think we can do it with just 1 CGI shot, and here's how. And, sort of drawing diagrams and explaining and sort of, and sort of reworking the scene to fit that. And, I think then, and the final scene, we were all sort of really happy with it, and it was a brilliant moment. So I think, writers can make good things happen and defend their work, whereas otherwise, if writers are not involved in the production process, it'll just be like, too expensive, cut it. So.
Yes, I totally agree. And I've probably used this example before, but I was doing a series, and we were getting toward the end of the shooting, and there wasn't much budget left by that point. And I had a scene where there were a lot of people, and an ambulance screams onto the scene at the end, and, chaos and all that. And there was just no money in the budget. And they, first want to cut the scene, which was an important scene. And you go, I can give you 2 versions. There's the version with you hire the ambulance and do the filming and all the rest, or do the scene, and then at the end, you have the sound effects of an ambulance coming, and you shoot the characters' reactions. And to be honest, that sometimes work better. In this case, because it was a joke anyway, got the laugh.
Yes.
But
people joke about, the sirens and the blue light playing on the faces, but it tells the story. It tells the story, and if that's the story you need to tell, then
because we can use our imaginations. A very good question here from Jean about how do I approach CBBC with a suggestion for an adaptation of a children's novel, and obviously I want to write the adaptation. What do you think, Em?
Well, I think obviously there are various questions about it. Sort of, is it in copyright? Do you hold the rights? I mean, I would suggest, if you want to write the adaptation, I would kind of suggest before approaching CBBC, probably check out the agent of the person who does hold the copyright, so you can find out if what's going on with the rights. And perhaps then approach CBBC. I mean, I think Anna Davis at CBBC is the head of drama development, and and various people that she, I think sort of, her email is the standard BBC format. I think you can contact her, and she'll put you on to other people. And they have development people, they have script editors there who are quite often reading novels and looking through. So but I think if you want to adapt a novel yourself, I would sort of say first of all, check out the right situation and see if you can get any sort of option on them.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is always do not even think of working on something you do not own the rights to, because it's a hiding to nothing. So much heartache can happen that way. And my other thing is look for things that are out of copyright, because if you have to take an option, options will cost money, depending on what the book is and who the author is. Try to make friends with the author, but it can be anything from £1 for an option to many thousands. So I don't want to fall in love with anything I don't own.
Yeah. I mean, that's we're both quite pragmatic about this. That's my own, that would be my own take on it as well. I mean, it's sort of thing you see lots of discussions about in writers groups, and some people saying, oh, but I'm just really loving my Star Wars universe story. So I'm, and I'm developing as a writer and getting great joy from it. It's like, well, that's great, but you know that you won't be able to exploit that commercially ever. So
yeah.
And I think also if you are wanting to work on something which is out of copyright, of course, I would say possibly work up some sort of unique treatment of it, which is very much this is how I want to do this, and this is why I think it speaks to today, because that way hopefully whoever's reading it will fall in love with your vision of it, rather than, oh, what a good idea, let's get Jack Thorne to do that. So
yes,
you know, I would say because obviously, as we know, in British copyright law, ideas aren't protected. They need to be in a substantial form, and I think like a treatment which describes your very personal, specific take on it, which hopefully producers or commissioners might fall in love with, would be the way to go on out of copyright material.
yes, very, very wise. Those are wise words. And also answer the question, why now?
Yes. Yes.
Other than because it's cheap. You know, there's a question from Debs Robert, which is, what opportunities now are there for writers who aren't represented yet? There seems to be a loop of can't approach production companies without an agent and can't get an agent without a credit. Are there competitions for children's TV? What do you think, Em? I don't know about any competitions for children's TV offhand.
I mean, Writers' Room does occasionally have, well, there are competitions. I think Rockcliffe do one with BAFTA. So look at BAFTA Rockcliffe. That's because that's a regular one. I know that sort of the Writers' Room has sometimes put together groups of potential new writers for CBBC and CBBS, which again might not necessarily, people might not have even sent children's scripts to them. In fact, I think I might have been on one many years ago, that the Writers' Room just has scripts they like. I think, I mean, the agent work loop is that catch-22 has always been, it was true when I was starting out, it's always been true. But I do think actually children's did then, and still do to an extent, I got my first jobs on Tracy Beaker and Doctors without an agent, and I think some of these shows, I think particularly some of the CBBC shows do take unrepresented writers. So I think actually in that way children's can be a good place to start. And I think most production companies will say they don't read unsolicited scripts, most because they don't want to make promises, also because they're scared of lawsuits. Most in practice will read some. So again, it's sort of, I think it's being persistent and trying a lot of places, because no production company wants to go, yes, we will read all unsolicited scripts and give feedback, because they'd be deluged. But I think if you do keep sort of respectfully and cleverly targeting people and explaining why you think you'd be a great fit for them, you might have to try a lot of places, but you will eventually get somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Also, from Lottie and Alice, BAFTA's Rockcliffe entries are currently open until March for children's and family scripts, and people have very kindly put links onto it.
Perfect. Thank you, Lottie.
So yes, thank you. It's nice to know these things. Well, actually, here's another good question from Malcolm. If you have ideas for a children's series, is it worth making or testing your ideas on YouTube?
Oh, I would say yes. To be honest, I mean, it's interesting because it's sort of I think people have different schools of thought about this, because I think obviously if you make it, you might not be able to make it with the sorts of production values which some companies might be able to make, and it might put people up. However, there are also, you might depend. I would say it depends on your skill and how well you think you can make it work, because actually, when you're making things through official channels, and you have to obey all the rules about how many hours children can work, and things get very expensive very quickly. Whereas if you're just doing shorter things in a sort of guerrilla filmmaking type way, you can actually, if you're quite skilled, you might actually be able to make something look that really makes people sit up. And there are internet-based things, like there's a whole channel called TrueTube, which does really well. So I would say a cautious yes. Don't try and make, if you are convinced that your work will be shown to best advantage. There we go. That's what I'm stumbling towards.
That's a nice one.
What do you think,
Gail? Well, I was going to jump in as well, which is I mean, YouTube and social media are fantastic because, as somebody's just said, somebody turned an idea into a children's film and filmed it during lockdown. But use it very much as a calling card and as a shop window. And instead of sending scripts around, if you can send a few minutes or a 5-minute, you don't have to film the whole thing, do a sizzle reel, a taster. But also what you have to remember is be very careful about what you put on YouTube because of copyright. And it's yours and somebody can easily lift it. And sad but true. So, you know, sort of, sorry, I was just seeing something there. So, you know, we use, I mean, on Monty Co and other things, we've used YouTube, and we have a YouTube channel to put out tasters. But I wouldn't like to put out, especially, it just depends. You know, a whole unsold work, if you're in danger of getting it, you know, pirated. But it's a great calling card if you want to use it as a calling card and send links to companies and to agents and say, this is what I can do. I mean, to be honest, I had a link sent to me, and I will, you know, somebody made a half-hour pilot for a soap type thing, and I was blown away by this writer who also directed. So I would say use as calling card. And also, when we were talking about unrepresented, of course, Emma, we have to mention the Writers Guild. Yes. Because if you haven't got an agent, and if you get contracts or offers or whatever, if you're a member of the Writers Guild, the Guild will always, and you have no agent, the Guild will always vet your contracts, which is invaluable for people without agents. So you have the backup. And also remember, the Guild is always there to give advice, you know, and help all along the way. So the Guild has never been more important, because there's a lot of opportunity about, but with opportunity goes people trying to rip you off as well. So I mean, I would say one of the most important things for a writer is never give away your copyright. Unless you're being, you know, unless in a proper contract. But Emma, what do you think?
Yes, agree.
Yes, yeah. And also have a look at YouTube, because there is YouTube Kids. There was a point that they were going to invest in some productions. I don't know whether they did or not. But I mean, YouTube can help you, and they can help you, you know, launch series and you know, short series and all the rest. So it's use everything, but protect yourself, is what I would say. But now I think we're drawing near the end, but anybody have any more questions? Have we anything that we've missed out? I was going to ask you, Emma, if in case Netflix is watching, what sort of thing do you want to do next? Film, telly, stage.
I'm sort of interested in kind of branching out into a sort of work for sort of young people, but slightly older than the CBBC age group. And you know, and I'm thinking, I think that sort of that has been lacking. The BBC know it, sort of that it's sort of lacking, and because as I was saying, that there has been quite a sort of hard ceiling in terms of age appropriateness on CBBC for a very long time, and I think the BBC moving to iPlayer first as a model could be a very positive thing.
So when you're saying for older, do you want to write? Are we talking young adult or both?
Both. I think I think you know, I think My Mum Tracy Beaker sort of did have a cross-generational appeal, and you know, I'd like to work on more shows like that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's the one thing I find, even with programs for very little children like Monty Co, we get a lot of grown-ups watching, some without children, because you know, sort of it's always been my thing that if you're going to make a show, you want to appeal to everybody. I hate when things, I mean, of course it's a children's show and all the rest, but it should be entertaining.
Yes.
for
Yeah.
whoever's going to tune
Yes,
in.
don't be boring. That's pretty important.
Yep. Here's another question. Re copyright. What if you have adapted a story in public domain, myths and legends, for a company, and they've asked to retain the rights to your adaptation? Is that a red flag? I know what my answer is. Emma, would you like to put
I
your
would say
television?
that's definitely a flag, and I would say speak to both to your agent and to the guild.
Yes, and also if someone wants to retain the rights, it's always what I call, can I take your cow to market? What are you going to give me for the cow? Why should I hand over my? I always liken a series or an idea to selling your house. You show it. You wouldn't just show it to one person, and the person will say, "Well, I like your house, but I'll see whether or not I come back or not." You're going to show it to as many people as possible, unless somebody says, "I will give you this down payment or whatever it is to take your house off the market."
Yes.
And also, it's not only money you want, but it's how long do they have the option for? Do you want to give them an option for a year, 18 months, 2 years? Once they get the option, can they proceed without you?
Exactly. So this is why you should speak to your agent and the guild.
Yes, because you know, keep your riches for yourself. You know, and read fine print of all the competitions very, very carefully, or ask the guild, because in a lot of those competitions, you're not BAFTA, I hasten to add, but in some competitions, you're handing over your copyright for a handful of magic beans.
Yes.
Right, just seeing if there are any questions that we haven't answered. But Emma, anything else you want to add?
Just that, you know, writing children's TV can be a, you know, a joyful opportunity to write across loads of different genres, and you know, to connect with an audience who is very intelligent, very discerning, and really, really cares. So
Yes. And beware, if you have child actors, you often end up keeping them after the series, but that's another story.
Got a few old friends, haven't you?
Yes, because if you do a series for many years, they bond with you, and if you've been on location, they end up, they're yours afterwards. But one last question: do you have any say in casting choices for your show? Do you get involved in casting?
Yeah, I mean, as always, it's what you can get in your contract and then what you can insist on. I think I have, because of my role as associate producer, I think I have meaningful consultation, which can mean all sorts of things. But I think crucially, it means that I'm often asked, and of course, it's all been via Zoom recently. But you know, I have in the past been in the room in casting, or sort of a Zoom room, and I always find with casting, even if people are initially reluctant to sort of let you get involved or let you be there, actually, because casting is such a difficult art, and it once you are in the room, people will listen to absolutely anyone's opinion, because you know, you notice that sort of suddenly, like, nobody's entirely sure of themselves, particularly when you're casting young people, and you know, you are literally, not literally, but figuratively, you know, you're betting millions of pounds on an 11-year-old. So
yes. Yes, one of my pieces of advice, which I love doing, is casting against type.
yes.
And to tell a story about me, it was a friend was doing a major drama thing and was having trouble, because he didn't know to cast a doctor who was a terrible murderer. We're talking about a Harold Shipman type, and we're going back 20 years, or well, a good few years now, because of the actor, and he had seen The Usual Suspects. And I said, the most evil person I could think of to play a part like that would be Paul Eddington. And Paul Eddington did it, and did it brilliantly, of course. And he thanked, it was lovely. He wrote a letter after saying he never gets offered these sort of parts. Thank you so much. And you know, remember, people are actors, and if they're good actors, they like to get their teeth into things. But sorry, I see something here about an 11-year-old who's playing a 9-year-old. very often children play down. I hate to tell you, I was 22 and still playing 16-year-olds. So, you know, you try and get someone older because they're different, you know, school. What are the age breakdowns for school?
The hours that they can do, I think, sort of, you know, as soon as they're 14, they can do more hours. When they're 16, they can do a lot more hours. So people will often try to sort of, you know, cast up in the, so somebody sort of over one age for sort of licensing and restrictions to play down another age. So yes, yes, child actors who are small for their age are always in very great demand.
Yes, I used to keep giving, when I did a series, give the child actors as many cigarettes to stunt their growth as possible, is my advice. I think on that note, I think we better stop before we get into too much trouble. Emma Reeves, thank you so much. I mean, and also thank you because you have made millions and millions of children happy, because you know your writing has been a very important part of their lives and will be for many decades to come. So let's hear it for Emma. Thank you very, very much.
Let's hear it for Gail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. And I'm going to just join in with a few last notes for everybody. Just picking up on a few of the questions somebody asked about competitions. If you are a member, or even if you're not a member of the Guild, you may not know that our weekly newsletter carries up to about 600 competitions a year. Wow. And that includes a lot of children's competitions in there. So but it's only for members. So please join if you would like access to that. I'd also like to thank both of you for a fantastic session. That was great. Emma, of course, is very modest. She is the chair of our TV committee. And this is a group of our members who pool their experience and expertise to help us burnish the industry agreements that guarantee the fees and the terms of TV writers. That without people like her, and indeed Gail, a lot of our writers would be facing quite a tough time. This has been an extraordinary time, and these Zooms have brought us together, you know, really closer than ever before. But, you know, the Guild, this trade union is more than a shop, and we're really here to support writers at all stages in their career. Whether you're a student, an emerging writer, a professional writer, maybe you've just changed career. We want to hear about the issues and challenges you're facing. So please get in touch. We want to ensure that everyone has equal access to writing opportunities. That really is top of our agenda as well at the moment. So please get in touch with us via our website. I'm just going to copy the our email as well, our general email, into the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. Our next Zoom event is actually tomorrow, and this is Can You Make a Living Writing Audio and Podcast Drama? The bookings deadline is actually passed, but if you'd like to come along, please contact me. I've already put the link in, but I will just paste it in again, and then I can send you the Zoom link so that you can get in touch with me and take part in that as well. Thank you all again, and we hope to see you soon.
Yes, and you can all just stay at your desks and wait till tomorrow at 5 o'clock for the next one coming along.
No, that's another Zoom meeting. Thank you, Susan. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.